Friends, if everybody would be kind enough to take a moment and turn off the cell phones. At the conclusion of the service, the washrooms that are on the first floor are off limits to us because of the daycare center. So anyone who needs to use a washroom at the conclusion of the service needs to use the elevator or the stairs to go up to the second floor. Okay? Super.
Thank you, everyone, for coming this morning. Welcome to Temple Har Zion. And I'd like to invite everyone to join us at the graveside following the service. And later this day, at the house of Sheldon and Lynn, to fulfill our tradition of comforting the mourners, of Nichum Avilim. This morning, we are here to mourn the passing, but also to honor and to celebrate the life of Shirley Braun. Shirley was just a wonderful person whose selflessness and grace touched everybody who met her. There just seemed to be infinite room in her heart for everybody who knew her. She was the eternal optimist, devoting herself to being there for others and uplifting others and only thinking of them. She always said how she felt so honored to have so many people in her life who cared for her, but she didn't realize how much more touched everybody was of knowing her and how she changed their lives. She especially loved celebrations and gatherings, and she was a professionally trained singer who sang at every bar and bat mitzvah, and every wedding, at every happy occasion. I'm sure so many of you here. She just had that artist's grace, sharing her love of music and her soulfulness with everyone else. She truly had a gift for friendship. She just knew her way into a person's heart. And she communicated her values and gently guided everyone, especially her big family, with her love. Because she understood that the purpose of life is to serve and to give to others. A matriarch, immensely respected by her family, who will hold her and her memory in their hearts forever. Devoted wife and partner in every way to her husband Jerry, beloved mother of Bonnie Hoffman, and Howard and Jan, Sheldon and Lynn, Claudia, also beloved mother-in-law of Michael Hoffman and Jerry Berman, exceptional grandmother who embraced all her grandchildren and their spouses, Josh Berman and Amy Ornay, Jamie and Andrew Schiffman, Mackie Berman, Joe Grant, Aaron and Bobby Loder, Aaron and Risa Braun, Michael and Natalia, Julie Medor, Stephen, Cherry, Emily, Jen and Nate, Haley and Josh, Wes and Chelsea. She took everybody into her embrace. She adored all of her great-grandchildren and seemed to have endless energy, even into her 90s, to being there for her. I'm going to read out all their names. Maddie and Naomi and David and Lily and Ella and Philip and Liam and Adva and Jonathan and Adam, Romy and Zoe and Mason, Eliana and Raphael and Levi and Benny and Maury and Desi and Zev, born just this last year. dear sister of the late Mildred and George Sparrow, Sylvia and Maury Bloom, Phyllis and Melvin Rudder, Ira, Goldie Singer and Olive Singer, sister-in-law of the late Irving, Tibby Braun, Estelle and David Abode, Mark Braun and Marilyn and Herb Mazer. And she was a beloved member of the synagogue, coming into this room, into this sanctuary for so long. She was a tribute lady in the sisterhood, one of those people who had a gift for connecting everyone else. She was the lead role in many of the theater productions that defined the whole era of the synagogue's life. She was Glenda in Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and she was Golda in Fiddler on the Roof, member of the choir that stood right up there in the choir loft behind all of you. And she was especially devoted to Cantor Brindel, who was a cantor here for 40 years. Beloved friend to all who knew her. So we will now recite biblical readings and passages connecting Shirley to the long chain of her ancestors, and to her heritage, to the traditions that were dear to her. First, from the Talmud, Mibait umichutz titzapenu. So the Torah calls our attention to the fact that the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark that was carried by the children of Israel in the desert, was covered with gold, outside and inside. Now we can readily understand why it would be covered with gold outside. What need was there, however, for the Holy Ark to be inlaid with gold on the inside? So the answer that a person should be identical on the inside is to the outside. Tocho kevaro. And such is the case with goodness, that its open expression has to be matched by an inner conviction. I think one would be hard-pressed to find someone who is as golden inside and outside as Shirley. Pirkei Avot, the Mishnah asks, Eze mechubad, who is honored? One who honors and loves and cares for other human beings. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said, the deepest wisdom that a person can attain is to know that his or her destiny is to aid and to serve. Shirley not only honored and loved and cared, but also never judged other human beings. Finally, from the book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, "L'kol zman ve'ed l'chol chefetz tachat hashamayim." A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. Time for planting and a time for reaping, time for keeping and a time for discarding, time for loving and a time for hating, time for embracing and a time for refraining, time for slaying and a time for healing, time for laughing and a time for weeping, time for dancing and a time for wailing, time for birthing and a time for dying, time for speaking and a time for silence, time for seeking and a time for losing. We will now share stories and eulogies to honor Shirley's life. And I invite the four siblings who will share their thoughts. Then I will share a few words. First Bonnie, then Howard, then Sheldon, then Claudia.
Mom, How do I begin to describe all the gifts that you have given to me, my children, my grandchildren, your nieces and nephews, cousins, and your machotunim, my dear friends, and lucky people who crossed your path. These past few weeks, I heard a common theme from people who admired and adored her. She was a beloved person in whoever talked to me. She was referred to as the Energizer Bunny, ageless. Everyone's mother that needed one or wanted one. The lady with the $1 million smile. She was the hostess with the mostest. She was a cheerleader for anyone who needed it. Mom herself was a wellspring of wisdom. But God forbid you tell her that that's what she was, because she would say, oh, no. She didn't have any wisdom to share. She was the queen of when you got lemons, make lemonade, always. My mother practiced what made a good life. You must have a sense of humor, she told me. These were my lessons. Without it, she would say, you're cooked. Forgive and forget, she said. No one is perfect. Celebrate life by counting your blessings every day. Especially these past few months when her energy was waning and her stage 4 rectal cancer, who had been diagnosed over a year ago, and people looked at her and said, she's a 97-year-old woman. She has stage 4 cancer. Well, they didn't know my mother. Her conversations with me revolved around each of my kids. I live in California, which was a very hard thing for both my mom and dad almost 10 years ago. It's hard to believe. They came to like they do. It was hard. They cried. I cried. We all cried. And they had the grace that they gave me to wish me happiness, whatever it looked like. She would say, Josh, my first, marveling at his wisdom and compassion that he had for others, that he was not only a skilled therapist, that he was a professional musician, a cornetist. And Amy, the love of his life and her life. Lucky us. She said she was in awe of Amy's grace, her presence and her kindness, as well as her weekly, with Josh, Sunday brunches. Jamie, living in DC, you'd never know it, working in a very amazing capacity, as all of you know, as Jews today, as a vice president of Hillel. Now, Hillel is in every campus across this country. Trouble in Israel, trouble in Europe. And they called and spoke with Jamie, who is right under the big boss, who is the wing beneath his wings. Just my opinion. She has a devoted, loving son. Sorry, no sons, we've got daughters. She has an amazing partner, Andrew. She called her Angel, who would fly in a moment's notice, who would carve the turkey in the middle of the early morning hours so it would be ready for Thanksgiving. Jamie had the quick visits, and he took over at home a lot. Beautiful daughters they have, Maddie and Naomi. And the rabbi said, there's something special about when you can be beautiful inside and out. And they represent beautiful inside and out. And Grandma would agree with me that that was true. Mom would tell me how touched she was always that these teenage girls wanted to sit and talk to her. She wasn't just an old lady sitting in the corner. They wrote letters to her camp. I mean, you know, she would cavil all the time, and it didn't matter who it was, but these were mine. And Mackie. Well, Mackie, she would say to me, honey, you know she's my grandchild. I love her dearly, but honey, she's my friend. She had lost every friend. She's the last living family member of her generation. Every one of her friends died before her. She was a social butterfly. And Mackie and her were buddies, and since Grandpa died. It was Mackie who was Tuesday, lunch on Tuesdays. They knew them. They knew them at the restaurant that they went to, at Harbor. And if they didn't show up 1 week, they said, where were you? A very special person. She loved that she was a school social worker, but loved better that she was in private practice and she didn't have to drive from the city to Lombard anymore, because Mackie hates traffic. Joe, Mom would say, she's never seen Mackie happier, which made her so happy. He's there for her in good times and in bad times, as she is for him. And she was amazed how wonderful she felt after she talked with him on a one-to-one. Of course, Michael, who she adored, better than me, as my father would say, Ma, I'm the outlaw. I'm the in-law, you know. But you know what I mean. He sent flowers for every occasion. There wasn't one that was missed. Fussed over her at every event. She came alive when she talked with Michael. I'm forever grateful. I'm grateful my brother Shell has been her go-to guy for just about everything. As my dad instructed, it's not an easy job. With full support from my mom, there is Lynn by his side, 150%. Amazing Lynn, as well as her kids and their grandkids. Howie had a standing late Wednesday lunch. I would talk to her in California, and I said, how late is he? She says, you know, he'll come when he can. And I said, that's right. And that's what I keep trying to learn from my mother. I'm on the slow track. Claudia. Oh, sorry, I missed Jan, because Jan called almost every day. How are you? I love you. And her children. Claudia, my mom's baby. As a result of a twist of fate, 5 years ago, COVID breaks her leg. What are we gonna do? Go to Mom's house. But there's 26 stairs. No problem. And that's the way it went. My mother helped nurse my sister because she couldn't walk. And she'd say, as she was taking the tray of food up, don't look. But as Claudia and I would say, It became mutually beneficial. And Alma. What would we do without Alma? Caregiver supreme, who Mom grew to love and respect, but most importantly, who she trusted with her life, and we did too. As she grew physically weaker, there are no words to say how grateful I am, and this is my family, for her love and devotion. You can have helpers, because we have had a few, but there was only one Alma. Thank you. My dear friends, and I don't know if you're here or not, because honestly, I am partially here, but I know that this is my mother, me standing here composed, because that's what you do. And there's time to cry, and now's not the time yet. But I have been crying, Mom. It's just not, So, my dear friends Louise and Ann and Gail and Sharon and Renee too, constantly remind me how lucky I was and am to have such a wonderful mom. Her delight to welcome Braun, who met her with a box of candy in hand, who she talked with like she knew forever, and made everybody comfortable. All these special folks in my life helped me see just how right they were. Remember, I told you I'm on the slow track. Mom was the definition of a real mom, devoted to her children till her last breath. Mom's motto was love of life, and spread it around. She will, and she always will be, an inspiration who lived a life rooted in a strong faith in God. Though she was not a temple goer or could read barely a word of Hebrew, and to continue to carry the torch of commitment to gratitude for our blessings, devotion to family, and belief that it's all about love. I'll end by saying, as she would sing to us everyone's favorite song that brought tears to everyone who heard her sing it, whoever you were. I thought I could sing it, but I can't. Thank you. One season following another, laden with happiness and tears. I love you, Mom, forever. And trust you are in good hands. Shalom, my mama. And peace. Amen.
Howard.
Rabbi did a beautiful job. Bonnie did a beautiful job. We're here for a beautiful lady. Anyone who knew my mom knew that they were talking to somebody who really cared for them. I heard tonight that somebody met her and said, this person can't be this sweet. I mean, she must be a put on, right? Not at all. She really cared about the people that she loved, and she loved most. You know, I grew up in family, and to me, as family is so important. I do crazy shit, excuse my French, but it's about family. And my kids, my life, are my life, my wife. We learned this from my mom, my dad, that when we go around the Thanksgiving table, each one was to say what they were thankful for. And you know, I was blessed. I'm in Chicago. And I asked Mom, because my sibs would say, oh my God, Mom is suffering so. I had a difficult time with that. Because I would ask Mom, how are you feeling? I feel wonderful. Okay, she's suffering. I'm having a tough time with that. Don't get me wrong, I'm very blessed with my children. They're like 5 rocket scientists, right? Who knew? My oldest, Aaron, today's gonna be a tough day. He helped all he could. Every hour, he heard from all my sibs. Dad, I can't talk to you. Why not? Bonnie's on the phone. Okay, talk to Bonnie. He calls me. I can't talk to you. Shirley's on the phone. Okay, fine. Okay, good. Okay. You know, each one of my kids are absolutely, positively marvelous. And my wife, she did call Mom. In her own way, she loved Mom very much. And my mom would say, you know, I just talked to Jan. I said, oh, that's nice. We grew up as family. We have a very large family on both sides, the Brauns and the Singers, and we grew up going to each side and loving them all despite all the craziness. But it's our craziness. It's our love. And Mom and Dad, because Mom was part of Dad and Dad was part of Mom, they showed us that family is so important on the holidays and when it wasn't a holiday. That stuck really hard. I mean, really hard. No matter how much is going on, you make time. Okay, you do. That's just what you do. And there's not a good reason why you're not doing it. Well, no, it doesn't matter. So, you know, we always knew that Mom would be there. Always. Weddings, bar mitzvahs, funerals. She would be there. At a wedding, she would sing. At a bar bat mitzvah, she would sing. But more importantly, she was there in heart and soul. It just was. She loved being the star, and she was a star. Not only on the stage, but off the stage. This was just her. And to know her was to love her. For real. I mean, she would go down an elevator and she'd know all the people. I mean, how could this happen? She just don't know the elevator. You know, walk in a room and my dad would say, what is she doing? But that's what she just was the perfect individual person. And she wasn't trying to do it. It wasn't a forced situation. This is just and was her. My kids are in different parts of the country these days. I am very, 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 very blessed. And I need to learn from my mom, which I don't do, to smell the roses. It's just one of those things I would tell my mom over lunch, which of course every week on Wednesday, as it was said, I would see my mom for lunch. And I would bitch of all the crazy shit that's going on in my life. And she would listen. Don't get me wrong, she would listen. But she's looking for the good things. She'd emphasize the good things. And that's just her. It was her. So you let out whatever it is, and after you're talking to her, you feel better about it. I shouldn't do anything, but you just did. It's very hard to live as she did, always looking positively at life. And that's exactly what she did. As far as my own family, again, I have Aaron, Risa, Zoe, Mason in Houston, with one on the way due in September. I'm going to go through order. I got Michael, Adalia, Ileana, Raphael in Seattle. I've got Stephen, Chen, Adva, Jonathan, Adam, and Romy in Houston. Julie, Liam in Chicago. And Emily, the baby. To say that I'm blessed? Yeah, unbelievable. Unbelievable. This is a tough one, Mom. We all love you. We will love you. You're not gone. You're just in a different part of this world. You will never be gone. Certainly not forgotten. If I had a bourbon in my hands, I'd say l'chaim, to life. And I wish life and health for all of us here and all of us who can't make it. And peace would be a nice thing too. So Mom, this is your day, but it's always been your day. We loved you, we love you, and we will always love you. Thank you all for being here.
Sheldon.
Rabbi, you did great. My sibs never let me down. Ani and Howie were terrific because it came from the heart. I so appreciate all of you being here because we're celebrating, as you've heard. And boy, don't get me started on one very special lady. I love talking about my mom, for those of you that didn't know. I love talking about incidental, small stuff that just is so meaningful to me and to anybody else would be a nothing. Why do I love going to the grocery store? And why do I love couponing? And why do I, moments that would take an hour to describe. When I first became a lawyer, there's the first Passover. My mom schleps from Oak Park, has to bring a matzah kugel, so I have something to eat for lunch. Lunch is another story for those of you that don't know, and I'll hear about that forever. My mom showed love and compassion, as you've heard, not just to me, even though I thought it was just for me as a child, but to everyone that came in contact with her. I had the privilege of having this incredible woman for 71 years. What a gift. You've heard about my mom's smile. I'll remember it forever. To me, it was sincere and it was warm and embraced me like a warm blankie. Being with my mom was a treat. I could be myself. There was never any risk of judgment. I was unconditionally loved. For some people, their glass is half empty. Some people, their glass is half full. My mom's glass didn't have enough room because it was always overflowing with abundance. I never understood how she'd be so positive and upbeat about life when life was really tough on her, especially as a kid. She had a serious back injury and needed surgery as a child. She lost a sister. She lost her mom and dad before she was finished with her teenage years. But from my mom's perspective, she always believed that she was incredibly fortunate. I couldn't wait to bring Lynn home to meet my parents. My mom was thrilled. You see, my mom had one fundamental belief. Love makes the world go round. And if you're in love, everything else is so much easier to achieve. Well, Mom could see that I was in love. My mom adored Lynn, just from the beginning. And as those of you that hung around in the last few years, you would hear Mom say how proud she was of Lynn, how in awe she was of Lynn's strength, especially as she stood up to Parkinson's and told me never to forget it. My beautiful children, Jen, Haley, and Wes, and their wonderful spouses, Nate, Josh, and Chelsea. You guys have had the privilege of really knowing your grandma. But even more, your grandma really knew you, and I heard about it regularly. I didn't hear about it in summary, I heard details. And by the way, if she didn't get the right details from me, she was never bashful to pick up the phone. Oh yeah, we enjoyed all kinds of stuff together. Ballet recitals, chorus concerts, theater performances, field hockey, and oh yes, baseball. And did they travel for any of those things? Well, yeah, Deerfield was part of it, Champaign, Illinois. Oh, about what, New York City? Maybe to Florida. How about Wisconsin? Maybe to California. How about Sydney, Australia, when my dad was turning 90? That's just who they were. Nothing was hard, nothing was too big. Going through the airports, it sounds like they were Mr. and Mrs. Magoo, but they made it. And they were wonderful. Jen can tell you a story about Grandpa shaving when they had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and my dad's shaving at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, and he could, the sink stuffed, and he slammed on the door and couldn't understand. But nothing was too hard. So he shaved in the bathtub. Getting the family together for my mom and dad was an art form that they mastered. Every holiday was at a safe haven. Where was that? It was either at 1022 North Woodbine or we were in Lombard. Everybody that came to those places, they parked their swords and the machine guns and the machetes. Everything stayed at the door. Everybody was civil, everybody loved, because that's the way it was. And up until recently, there wasn't anything that my mom didn't prepare. Meatballs, chopped liver, whatever it was all homemade, and it was all done by my mom. Homemade, I thought, was a swear word. If it didn't come from homemade, I thought my mom, God forbid it should be from a bakery. That was just the way it was. And again, nothing was too hard. So when we were at these events, everybody talks at once, and everybody talks louder than the next one so that they can get their point across. It's a lovely time. And all that, you know that there was music in the background. And on a couple of good times, really good occasions, we'd get Josh and Grandma at the piano, and you'd have folks singing, and maybe we shouldn't be, but we sang, and we sang our hearts out. And what there was, more than quality, gosh, there was lots of love. Extended family. Oh my God. We were taught the importance of aunts and uncles and cousins from a very young age. Especially with the singers, they lived a world apart. There were no expressways when we first were young kids. Distance is not a problem from my family. That's what I was taught. Distance isn't a problem. I hear for some people it is. It sounds nuts to me. But my mom had an unbelievable relationship with her nieces and nephews. I marveled at it. I watched it. I was the fly on the wall that got to witness it. And as their parents passed away, my mom was their connection. And I would always thank these cousins because they gave such a gift to my mom for being Aunt Shirley. She felt so special when you guys would call and you guys would visit. And when I would thank them, what did they say to me? You don't get it. She's giving to us. And Charlene, boy, are you brilliant. Charlene showed up the day before Mom's last hospital visit. Mom was really weak. Mom probably hadn't eaten in a while, had no appetite. I was there late. Howie was there an hour before I was. I get to the kitchen table, there's a half a bagel eaten. That was a week's worth of food for my mom. She stepped up because she needed to show Char, I'm Aunt Shirley. I'm here, honey. I'm here to do it. And it wouldn't be honey, she said Dolly. My mom's warmth and sincere appreciation for people was made known when you first said hello to her. My mom met my friends' children, and these were in group settings. How my mom was able to connect with all of these people absolutely blew my mind. Just before you sat down, I was reminded, really my oldest friend, who said he was a very shy kid, came to my house, 2nd or 3rd grade, didn't know anybody but me. I just met him in 2nd grade. He said Mom had an ability to put him at ease, to be able to make him feel okay with talking. That was Mom. So while I could go on talking about Mom, as you know, for as long as you guys have the time to listen, I'm going to miss these morning phone calls I had with Mom. How I shared the news of the day. She always wanted to know about every one of the kids. I always wanted to tell her about my problems. She'd listen. Basically would always tell me that my problems, and she would never preach. She'd give me her point of view. And if I went a direction that was different than what she had told me, never. And I ask everybody in this room, did you ever hear Mom say, I told you so? Never. As you guys said, no judgment. So, I pledge to you, Mom, I'll try to approach life as you did, finding joy in every day, keeping our family strong and tolerant of each other, because in the end, it's about us. I love you forever, Mama.
Claudia.
Mom could sing before she could talk. Her communication was music. When I was 3 or 4 years old, I remember wanting to stand right by her side. My dad wouldn't have it. 2 weeks ago, I took her to our cousin's 100th birthday party, Joyce. They had song sheets from her era, favorites. Side note, Mom and Joyce, when they were little, they used to perform together in Lincoln Park for their drama club. Mom would sing, and Joyce played the accordion. 2 weeks ago, Mom could barely read, but she didn't need to. She knew every word to the songs. Truly, at that time, she could barely walk. Together, we sang with everyone, with her frequently correcting me for jumping in too soon, saying, "Wait," a professional to the end. Last week, even though she was very sick, she reminded us, the show must go on. As many of you know, I spent the last 5 years at my mom's. That was not my plan. She begged me to live with her before she bought this place. I said, "I love you, but I cannot live with you." I lovingly say my father pushed me, and that's how I ended up at my mother's house. So with that in mind, if you would honor my mom and indulge me, because singing was her communication. My father loved to talk, but my mother loved to sing. And a cantor once told her, convinced her, this song was perfect for her voice, and it soon became one of her standards, and it was a favorite at her 95th birthday. I know my brothers and sisters know this song. It begins with Shalom, a song from Milk and Honey. The rest goes like this. So I invite you, for those of you who know it, to sing with me. Shalom, shalom, you'll find shalom, the nicest greeting you know. It means bonjour, salute and skol, and twice as much as hello. It means a million lovely things like peace be yours, welcome home. And even when you say goodbye with shalom. It's a very useful word. It can get you through the day. All you really need to know, you can hardly go wrong. This is your home as long as you say shalom, the nicest greeting I know. Shalom means twice as much as hello. It means a million lovely things like peace be yours, welcome home. And even when you say goodbye, if your voice says a little hello in it, and say goodbye with shalom. Shalom, Mom. I love you, and I know you will always be with us. Thank you for the last 5 years. It wasn't part of my agenda. I always say you know better. I didn't want a dog, and 7-8 weeks ago, I got a dog again, and he has been a blessing beyond belief. And he adjusted amazing to all of the family coming in. And when I had my last dog, I lived alone for 20 years, and it was me and my dog. So having a dog with a bunch of people has been very new for me. Thankfully, Kerwin loves you all. as do I. So thank you all for being here. Shalom.
I'd like to share a few more words about Shirley and biographical details on behalf of the family. Shirley grew up in West Rogers Park. She was the youngest of 6 children. And she grew up, as we've heard this morning, surrounded by family. Even though she endured loss at an early age when one of her sisters passed away when she was 9, then her mother passed away a little later. But she had this astounding ability to be resilient, to be strong. As has been said over and over, to find that silver lining, to be the optimist through and through. There's a story that I heard that when she was 9, that in her childhood, she spent 9 months in a full body cast. It was only for a broken hip, but somehow she had to do it. Everybody thought she had a broken back, but somehow she endured that burden the way she would all of her burdens. She was very devoted to her father. He took her to the movies. He called her light of her life. Maybe the first of so many people who found that quality in her. And he would sing to her. He had a very successful business that he had grown himself. But he too died while she was still a teenager. And Bonnie and Claudia told me that her father would say, "Smile and the whole world will smile with you. If you cry alone." And she heard that lesson. So she would always say, "I'm okay." That was her mode. Up until the 90s, her job was to take care of you, make sure the food was on the table for everybody else, always caring and worrying about other people. And she was an orphan, but she moved in with her oldest sister, who was 18 years older than her. She had these deep bonds with all of her siblings and felt so grateful that they were there for her in her moment of need. As Josh said, taught her that what was most important in life was not money, but was that connection to other people. So I asked the family, were those hard years for her? And they said, if you would have asked her, she would have said they were wonderful, because that was just the kind of person she was. So after high school, her brother's wife suggested she go to college. She went to Champaign for sewing, even though she didn't like sewing, but then she switched to music because she was professionally trained as a musician, as all of her siblings had received lessons from a tutor who came to the house. She had this beautiful voice, we all knew. And she passed the audition and went to music school. And that was her way, as we were saying, to communicate to the world, to give of her soul to others. It was in between those years of college, in the summer, that she met Jerry. And their first date was family lore. And we talked about it at Jerry's funeral. Heard how he was, a different area of Chicago, really different culture, a west suburbs, a Maywood guy, and he was coming to North Shore and greeted by her 4 siblings at the door. A little intimidating, but it was a legendary first date. He said back then he loved to talk, and she loved to listen. And they had this quick romance, meeting in June 47, and they were married in February 48. They had their differences, but they also shared a zest for life, just complemented each other so well, just partners in every way. As Sheldon said, he was the show and she was the magic. And over the years, their love, their values, that show and that magic became, as we heard, the center point and the role model for a big family. And she was into culture and music, poetry, and he was more into the ideas and intellectual knowledge. He also loved her and tried to take on some of that culture. He was more impulsive, she was more cautious. But they learned to work and balance it all out throughout all those years. So they lived in Champaign at first, went back there after getting married, and then she wanted to be closer to family in Champaign. And her family lived on the near north side, but his family business was in Maywood, right close to here. His family is one of the very first Jewish families moved out west, as I was reminded this morning. So she compromised. She was often willing to do and give in to other family members for the sake of love. And she said, okay, we'll try it out for 1 year. But that 1 year turned into over 60. So they lived in a condo, and then they had a piece of land in Maywood, and surrounding them were the houses of his sister and his parents. But everybody loved Shirley. It was not long before his own mother would take her side when they were arguing, and Jerry would have to remind her that he was her son. And so she just had this ability to endear herself to everyone. And Bonnie and Howard and Sheldon were born in Maywood. But then in 1957, a house came on the market in Oak Park with many bedrooms. She called the realtor herself and said, we want it. And it was more than Jerry wanted to spend, but she was adamant, because this was a house and a community that she wanted to be a part of. And that's where they made their lives. And Bonnie shared with me how Shirley had this special gift in how she understood all people, but how that manifested in her parenting to give each one of them what they needed. She had this ability to mold her love and to fill one's cup in the way that was uniquely needed. And that love extended, as we heard, to grandchildren and to friends of their children and friends of the grandchildren and to in-law grandchildren and their families and their parents, and everyone had a space at her table and was welcomed into that joy and that celebration that she felt was what we were here in this life to do. When they said to me that she hosted even into her 90s, I asked why was it only at her house? It just was. Every single holiday, Thanksgiving, every Jewish holiday, Mother's Day, for Flag Day, every day was going to be there. Any occasion to get the family together and to express those deep bonds of love and celebrate the miracle that we're all here in this life to share that. And it gave her energy to do that. She understood this is what life is about. And she also had her own life and independence and interest, and a big part of that for many years and while in Oak Park was here in this synagogue, as mentioned. And she was a fixture at social events and well-known, and everybody looked to her to connect other people. She had a gift for handwriting, and so she was a tribute lady for the sisterhood, and she worked the phones, and she knew how to connect people. She staffed the gift shop here on Sundays, and she loved Cantor Brindell, who was here for 40 years, and he loved her back. And even though she didn't read Hebrew, she learned them all the songs by heart. And even until the last few years, she came every high holidays. When we introduced new melodies, she still hummed along with all of it. Part of creating the life of the holidays here. So she had all those lead roles in all those shows, and that golden age of the social life of our synagogue. Glenda and the Wizard of Oz, and Golden Fiddler on the Roof, and the mother and Sheldon's bar mitzvah. She always the lead, because she had the talent, she had the training, but also, I'm sure, because she had the charm, and everybody knew that she would bring light into whatever production she did. And in our community, people still talk about those shows 40, 50 years later, and have restored DVDs and ask me to watch them. And she knew all the words to all of the classics and melodies, because they sang them through the year at every occasion. And as they all shared with me, they took on the role, Jerry and Shirley, of being grandparents with such zest and love, and expanded their embrace for everyone. They were exceptional grandparents, and they were young grandparents. Shirley was only in her mid-40s when Jamie was born. They took an interest in everyone, were there for every recital and every game, every graduation. The grandchildren told me they remembered the Oak Park house as a house of endless bedrooms. A place of love where your every need was looked after, where you were seen and heard. Josh once hid his shoes so he didn't have to leave the house. When the parents were out of town, they would come to your house, and in the morning, Jamie said that Shirley always made OJ in the blender, and always there. In 1987, they decided to move. She would have loved to move to a nice condo. He wanted a large piece of land. He would have liked a farm. So they moved to an acre in Lombard instead of a condo on Lakeshore Drive. Not ideal, but she made it work. And the four families were spread out around the Chicagoland area, but somehow she and Jerry glued it all together and met everybody in their moments. Meals of 30 and 40 people, but there was always room. And if there wasn't enough room, they would make more room. If they had to water down the soup. And everybody was touched by her spirit. It was not only about the gatherings, said to me, but it was in between the gatherings, she would invest her personal time and energy to talk to everybody, even into her 90s, spending hours on the phone to connect everybody together. She made everybody felt like they mattered, and to her, they really did. It was all sincere. She was adored by her great-grandchildren, going to B'nai Mitzvah even in the last year. When she moved up north, she was part of closer to other parts of the family, to Haley's family and others, and everybody felt privileged. She said she felt privileged that all of them were in her life, but she didn't realize how privileged everybody felt that she was in their lives. All the nieces and nephews, and even the friends in this own synagogue, long after the choir no longer was going, she still met with that group of friends. And there was a bridge group, and she cooked for them too. And her meals and the dinners and the time was so great, they never got to bridge. So we have a teaching in Judaism that every life stage has its own wisdom you have to bring to live it. And she was very skilled at living life and knowing how to bring what was needed to that stage of life. And so when Jerry got sick, she nursed him and took care of him, did everything for him. When he passed away in 2019, it was crushing. She maintained that optimist attitude and kept on going. We heard about how when Claudia broke her leg, she was going up the stairs after meals. Even into her 90s, nothing could stop her. She kept a busy lunch schedule, spent hours on the phone connecting with family who lived far away. 95, she got on a plane with Howard to go visit family in Seattle. Continued to have parties where she would hold court for 3-4 hours. For her 95th birthday, there were pictures on all the centerpieces of the family, and they shared loving and cherished memories. You know, for her 97th birthday, so many people came, and she wore a shimmering top and sang, of course. In the last few years, Claudia mentioned to me that also something else came in. She started to remember old poems, and old Yiddish expressions seemed to be more on her lips. And Mackie told me she'd never felt so close to God as in these last few years. In the past few weeks, she kept talking about planning a Shiva. Everybody wondered, whose Shiva was she talking about? And they realized that she was thinking of her own Shiva. Just an incredibly generous and giving person. 2 weeks ago, when the paramedics took her to the hospital, she told them, "Don't worry about me." As Claudia mentioned, or Bonnie, she just said, the show must go on. You can't live life without a sense of humor. She was just an extraordinary person who knew how to bind people together, not only with her love, but plant the love between them, plant seeds of love to put them all together. She inspired everyone, and because she didn't judge, everyone was able to go into that vulnerable space that made it possible. Just in the last few months, she told Bonnie that she enjoyed meeting with Mackie so much on Tuesdays, and she wasn't just her granddaughter, she was her friend. And this had moved her so much, friendship. And I saw in her room just a few days ago, one of her nieces had sent her a framed picture with that beautiful smile of hers, and it said, "Times Person of the Year, America's lightning rod for unconditional love, kindness, and good thought." And I'm so sure that even though physically she's not present with us anymore, that unconditional love and kindness and motherly spirit is there over all of us. And that lesson she learned from those early years, that richness is not measured in what we own, but in the love we have. And that love is truly infinite, because the more you give, the more you get, and then it just keeps expanding and expanding. There's a Hasidic story that I love of two rebbes, who were going from Krakow to Warsaw, and one of them got in the carriage, and the other was about to get in with him, but looked in the carriage and it was tiny. He said, "I don't think there's enough room for both of us in the carriage. I'll take a different mean." But his friend said to him, "Let us love each other more, and there'll be room in the carriage." And that's the lesson that she brought, that the more we love each other in this world, the more room there is for all of us. The more room there is for all the trials and tribulations and difficulties of life. She taught how to live life, how to love, both deeply but also with a light touch, how to go through life with song and caring, who she was and is, live on in all of our hearts forever as we prepare to lay her to rest. Please rise for the El Malei Rachamim prayer. El Malei Rachamim Shochin B'Amromim Hamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Ashchina B'Malot Kedoshim U'Teurim Kezohar Kiyamazirim נשמת רחל שהלכה לעולמה בגן עדן תהא מנוחתה אנא בעל הרחמים מסתיריה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים וצור בצרור החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוע בשלום על משכבה ונאמר אמן. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Shirley, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Amen. Please be seated.
As a reminder, those of you who will need to use the washrooms, you have to use the elevator, stairs, and go upstairs. Interment will take place at Jewish Oak Ridge Cemetery in Hillside, about a 25-minute ride in procession. Those of you who will not be going to the cemetery, we ask that as soon as you leave the sanctuary, please return immediately to your cars and leave the parking area. Those of you who will be going to the cemetery, when you leave the sanctuary, please go immediately to your cars. Make sure you have an orange funeral sticker on the inside right front windshield. We want you to turn your lights on. I mean, turn them on like we did in the old days, not just the automatic lights that come on when you start the car. Physically turn them on. And your emergency flashers. And try to stay as close to the car in front of you as possible to avoid gaps and spaces. Family will be receiving visitors and observing the Shiva at the Braun residence in Deerfield, following the interment until 7 o'clock this evening, and then again tomorrow between the hours of 12:30 and 4:30. You should all have a folder with a little map and directions to the cemetery. Grandchildren are going to be the pallbearers, and there's a lot of them, so some of them are going to be honorary pallbearers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the grandchildren to please rise and meet the casket in the lobby at this time. The rest of us will rise in silent prayer as we escort the casket from the sanctuary.
Mizmor le David, Adonai